A horrible thought creeps in, one that feels almost too embarrassing to admit. What if we've been forgotten? And it comes number 15, Ojo Rojo, Bournemouth. This was being told that out of every single bar in the United Kingdom, we were now considered one of the top 15. Hey guys, this is chapter 1 of a series where I read through the book that I'm currently writing. The book doesn't have a name yet, but what it does have is a story. This part of the book is my journey from the old version of me through Central America, through jungle roads and hostel bars and a chance meeting that changed the shape of my life, and into building a business I had no idea how to run. This isn't a book launch, it's kind of like a live workshop. If something lands, tell me. If something feels missing, tell me that too. Your feedback goes into what will eventually be confirmed as the final content. So if you're new here, welcome. And if you've been following the channel, thanks for coming back. These chapter reads will be fortnightly. So next week I'll be back with my regular video, and then the week after the next chapter will drop, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to give you some chapter context before I start reading, especially because this is the first one. I think it's quite important. So chapter 1 opens with a story about an awards night that I was in London for my business Ojo Rojo. I'll get straight into it in a minute, but before I do, one quick thing about why this chapter opens the whole series. The chapter itself moves between two moments, a year apart, a peak year and a much darker one. And it's set up that way to make a point. Everything after this chapter runs in chronological order. It starts from many years before this chapter actually happens, from the beginning of my story all the way through till now. But chapter 1 has to be first because it's the moment that made me realize the whole rest of the story needs telling. So here we go. So this chapter is called The Night I Let Myself Feel It. It's 2023 and I'm standing in a large basement style room with a stage at the front, surrounded by bartenders, owners and hospitality staff from every corner of the country. I've got a few of my own team with me and we're sipping on complimentary cocktails, trying to look a lot calmer than we feel. On the stage, the presenter has started counting down a list from 50, and with every single number, the room erupts. This is the UK Top 50 Cocktail Bar Awards in London, and the energy in that basement is electric. What strikes me most, even now, isn't the competition, it's the support. Every bar in that room is rooting for every other bar in that room. Representatives from all 50 venues are there, and not one of us knows where we're going to land, but it doesn't matter. When a name gets called, the whole room screams and claps and loses its mind for people that they maybe have never met before tonight. There's a kind of love in that room that's hard to explain unless you felt it. The adrenaline is everywhere and you can feel it in your chest. The year before, we'd come in at number 42, so in the weeks leading up to this one, the conversations had started. Where would we land this year? It was all we talked about, even on the drive down from Bournemouth that morning. The general feeling among us was that the low 30s felt realistic, and if we somehow broke into the 20s, we agreed that we'd be flying. Over the moon, that would be the result worth celebrating for weeks. So there we are, about 200 of us in that room, soaking up the atmosphere, listening to the numbers fall one by one and waiting. The countdown reaches 35 and I feel myself smiling so hard that my face hurts, because from this point on, whatever happens next, we're already where we hope to be. I remember thinking, this is it, this is the moment, and we've done it. And then the strangest thing happened. He kept counting. Then 25, and I turned to look at Gemma, who's been my number 2 since the year before we even opened our doors, who had as much a hand in all of this as I did. And I can see the same disbelief sitting on her face that's sitting in my chest. A horrible thought creeps in, one that feels almost too embarrassing to admit. What if we've been forgotten? What if we were left off the list entirely and someone simply invited us along by mistake? My mind's racing through every humiliating version of that scenario as the numbers just kept falling. Then 17, my heart is hammering now, and then it comes number 15, Ojo Rojo, Bournemouth. I don't have words for that moment. Genuinely, I don't have a single one. Making the list of the 50 best cocktail bars in the entire country would have been something to celebrate on its own. That alone would have been enough. But this wasn't that. This was being told that out of every single bar in the United Kingdom, we were now considered one of the top 15. The hugs came first, then the laughter, then the noise, 200 people screaming and clapping on our behalf. a wall of sound that wrapped around us and didn't let go. I've never in my life felt prouder of what a team of people had built together. And the strangest part of it all was where my mind went next, because around 11 years before that night, I was laying in a bunk bed in Mexico, scribbling notes in the dark, trying to make sense of a half-formed idea about a mezcal cocktail bar and a Mexican tapas restaurant. If you told that version of me in that bunk bed that nothing but an idea and far too much confidence, that one day he would be standing in a room in London being told he'd built one of the 15 best cocktail bars in the country, he'd have never believed you, not in a million years. And let's rewind a year. It's 2022, COVID is still going strong, and we're working flat out just to tick every official box being dumped on us by the authorities about how we should and shouldn't be trading. I was juggling more than I had ever juggled in my life, and that's saying something. When I first opened the venue, I had next to no experience in hospitality or running a business like this one. I'd only just about caught up with how the industry worked when COVID hit, and suddenly I was relearning everything all over again. Except this time, the rules were changing weekly and nobody actually knew the answers. Nothing was the same, and putting aside the daily updates and shifting restrictions from the government for a moment, the public's mentality had changed too. Where you could once predict a busy bank holiday or payday weekend, or know with near certainty that a Friday night between 7 and 9 would be packed, none of that held true anymore. That unpredictability was wreaking havoc on the business and everything that it kept efficient. I was taking on whatever I could to save money. I was in a constant state of worry, and I hadn't slept properly in what felt like months. My identity had become so closely wrapped up with the brand that I was struggling to see where I ended and it began. And because the business was struggling, I was struggling right alongside it, in lockstep, as if we were the same organism. I was anxious, I was angry, I was self-medicating most evenings just to switch my brain off. My leadership, my relationships, my own health, all of it was visibly suffering. And at one point I had to leave a shift halfway through, walk out the back and sit behind a car so nobody could see me having a panic attack. I was drowning, and somehow it had become the norm. Looking back now, I'm not even sure I had recognised it as a problem yet. It was just simply how things were. One day I walked up to the bar and I found the team laughing and cheering about something. What's up, I asked, and they told me that we'd been invited to the UK Top 50 Cocktail Bar Awards in London, where we'd find out what position we were in the list. I don't remember what problem I was in the middle of that exact moment. There were probably a few stacked on top of each other, as that's the way things were. But I remember feeling nothing. I acknowledged what they told me, said something like, "That's great," told them to decide between themselves who would go, and then I didn't think about it again for months. Over that time, I did what I'd grown used to doing. I moved from one fire to the next, putting each one out as fast as I could, and spent whatever was left of my attention worrying about what I should be doing instead. Then one day I walked in and the staff had gone to the awards and came back, carrying the top 50 plaque, telling me that we'd come in at number 42, which is, by any measure, an extraordinary achievement. They told me about the calibre of bars on the list, some of the names that had placed below us, the guests, the food, the drink, how the whole night had felt close to magical. And that's when it landed. I'd been so wrapped up in the business's problems, so consumed with working out which one needed solving first, that I hadn't even noticed a genuine win arrive. A team I had built, doing something most people in this industry would consider a career highlight, and I hadn't let myself feel it. Hadn't celebrated it for a single second. I was devastated, not by the news, but by what the news revealed about where I was. It was the first real sign that something in me needed to change. Looking back, it's the first moment I can point to in the long, slow journey out of burnout, where the need to do something practical, something with actual purpose, finally became clear to me. The years that followed held many more moments like that one, and it was through that whole stretch, through the burnout, through the anxiety, through the panic attacks, the personal anguish, that I slowly built the framework I now use with founders to help them either avoid that fate entirely or find a way out of it. To understand how I got to that bar, hearing the number 42 and feeling nothing, and standing in that room a year later and hearing number 15 and feeling everything, we have to go back to the beginning. So that's chapter 1. Reading it back now, 3 years on from the moment in that bar and years on from the moment with the plaque, I noticed something that I didn't fully understand when I was writing it. The gap between hearing the number 42 and hearing nothing, and hearing the number 15 and feeling everything, wasn't just about time passing. It wasn't about the business getting better. If anything, the year between the two moments was harder than the one before it. What changed wasn't the world around me. What changed was whether there was a version of me that was available to receive what was actually happening. At 42, there was no one home. The version of me who could have felt that win had been buried under everything that I was carrying. But at number 15, a year later, someone had come back. Not the full version yet, but someone like enough of a person to be present when the moment arrived. And that's what this whole book is really about. It's not about burnout. It's not about recovery. It's not even about business. The specific work of coming back to yourself so that when the good things happen, and they do keep happening, there's someone there to actually feel them. This chapter opens the book because it's the promise. And if you're a founder who's stopped being able to feel the wins in your own life right now, I think this book might help. And this chapter explains why. Now, every chapter that I'm going to read has stories around it that didn't make the final cut. There's bits that got trimmed and moments that got compressed into a paragraph. All of that will be on my Patreon. And if you want to hear some of the extra stories that make up the fuller versions of anything from this chapter and any chapter from now on, they live in the members area, and the link's in the description. As it goes on, you'll see why that's the case, because the stories that happen through Guatemala and the jungles and working on the beaches and all that kind of stuff, it has a lot of stories that I couldn't quite get into this book, but they're amazing and I wanted to share them alongside it. So sign up to the Patreon if you want to hear those stories as well. Or just continue following here just to see the next chapters as they come up. Because this series is going out before the book is finished, what you tell me here shapes what makes the final version. So a specific ask: what in this chapter landed hardest for you? What would you want more out of it if you could ask anything? What felt like needed more time? Feel free to drop your answers in the comments. I read every one of them, and they would directly shape what gets confirmed as final content when the book eventually goes to print. Also, if this chapter connects with you and you want to hear more about me on the specific idea of not being able to feel the wins, I did a standalone video of it on exactly that a few weeks back called The Day I Won the Biggest Award of My Career and Felt Absolutely Nothing. It's linked below, and there should be a link at the top of the video up here somewhere. And if you like this chapter, the video will land for you too. Chapter 2 will be in 2 weeks. It takes us right back to the beginning, to the version of me before any of this ever started. Before hospitality, before I even knew hospitality would be a part of the story. You'll meet the guy who was running live music events in Bournemouth and who was doing well but starting to feel a little bit stuck, and who was about to have a conversation with a stranger at a festival in France that changed the shape of everything. The next chapter is called The Last Event, and it drops in 2 weeks. I'll see you then.